Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, I want to know whether you, if you are a left-wing voter, would you be open to the idea of voting not for the left-wing party you normally vote for, but for another left-wing party or left-of-centre party? The Green Party, both leaders, have sent a letter to the leaders of the Lib Dems and the Labour Party, asking them to work together to form that so-called progressive alliance ahead of June's general election. They say that the three parties could and should work together in certain constituencies and stand aside for each other in some seats to stop the Tories wrecking our country, is how they describe it. But the reality of it is they just want to win certain seats that they won't win if they split the left-wing vote. If you are such a voter, does this appeal to you? Would you go along with this, or would you think, excuse me, don't play with my vote, I get to say who I vote for? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. We'll hear in a moment as well about a kind of a vote swap idea, where it isn't just parties playing with votes, it's individual voters swapping. I'll explain more in a moment, but essentially agreeing to vote a particular way in their constituency because of the makeup of that constituency, in return for someone else somewhere else in the country voting the way you want them to in their constituency. It will all become clearer in a few moments when we hear from Tom de Grunwald, co-founder of Swap My Vote. Let me just tell you a little bit about what the Greens have been saying. They say they believe there is a role for some form of cooperation in a handful of seats, is how they describe it. So they're not talking across the board, in order to stop Theresa May winning another majority. And as things stand at the moment, the best guess, early days in this election campaign, of course, so it's not a foregone conclusion, but the best guess is that Theresa May will win a substantial majority. And the Greens say we'd like to meet to explore the best options for beating the Tories in June. And they go on in this letter to the leaders of the Lib Dem party and the Labour Party that they understand that reaching out to another party at the beginning of election campaign can be a difficult thing to do. But they're calling for courage, they say, on the part of other parties, asking them to be visionary, to actively build a more positive politics. If you are a voter of the left, does this chime with you, or do you reject it outright because you get to decide the party that you vote for? Does it feel like game playing with your vote? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. John Rentoul joins me to talk about this for a few minutes, chief political commentator for The Independent. And Tom de Grunwald, as I mentioned a moment ago, is co-founder of Swap My Vote, who will explain what that means much better than I just did a few moments ago. John, first of all, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Sheila.
Do you believe there's any mileage in this?
Not really, no. I mean, I think it's, obviously under the first past the post system, it makes sense for parties to do deals and to trade, fairly late in the day, to stand down in each other's favours, because that's the best way of making of operating the system. But I think the whole idea of a progressive alliance is doomed and won't work, because it approaches the problem from the wrong end. I mean, the problem, as Tony Blair said in 1987, when he was a rising star in the Labour Party, which was about to lose its third general election, and there were siren voices calling for a progressive alliance then. He said the thing about an alliance is it would need a policy platform of its own. Just doing an alliance with another party doesn't get you out of having to make decisions about defence policy or economic policy or anything else. So, it sounds to me like a shortcut to try to avoid taking difficult decisions about policy and about appealing to the largest possible number of voters.
And clearly, he was right then, and he'd be right now if he said the same, that it needs some kind of cohesive, coherent policy. But each party doesn't have to be identical to be appealing to similar people, does it?
No, but I mean, his point was that in a majoritarian system such as the one we have in this country, there is nothing that Labour should concede by doing deals with other parties if it thinks that would help it win an election, that it shouldn't do for itself. I mean, if Labour wants to be an alternative government, then it has to represent a wide coalition of people, and trying to do deals with other parties is a shortcut to that, but and one which won't work under the first past the post system, which is why you have this idea of parties trying to stand down in each other's favour. But that, as the Green Party accepts, is only going to work in a very limited number of constituencies.
If you look at Richmond recently, where there was the by-election, and the Greens, I think, stood aside then, didn't they? There were calls for Labour to do the same, but they didn't.
That's right.
Can it be said with any certainty that the Greens failing to put, or choosing not to put a candidate forward, really made any difference in that election?
Well, I think it possibly did. I can't remember what the exact margin was, but I do remember thinking that if Zach Goldsmith, the Conservative, held that seat because Christian Walmart, the Labour candidate, refused to stand aside, then I think there would have been huge repercussions in the Labour Party. But that's a microcosm, because that's one seat where, you know, clearly a party's decision to stand or not stand could affect the outcome. But I mean, generally, if you're talking about a general election, those kind of pacts and deals don't work.
And that idea that it is very difficult to be open to one of your competitors. I think in their letter to the leaders of the Liberal Democrat Party and the Labour Party, they know all too well that everybody goes into their own bunker during an election campaign.
Yeah, I mean, the Greens are not completely green about this. I mean, they realise that actually it's very difficult for parties' national leaders to deliver those kind of pacts on the ground, because you've got local parties that have to be persuaded, and if you can't, if you try to impose something on them, there's a danger that they might run an independent candidate anyway. So those kind of deals are always going to be very difficult to construct. They did happen, you know, in the origins of the Labour Party when it was a rising force. You know, sometimes they and the Liberals would stand down in each other's favours, but you know, it's very difficult to do that under our system.
Stay with us, John. I want to bring in Tom now. Tom de Groenewald, co-founder of Swap My Vote. Explain what that is, first of all, Tom.
Swap My Vote is a web platform that allows voters to find each other who have complementary voting preferences. So you might want to vote Labour but be in a Liberal Democrat, Conservative, marginal, for example, and so your tactical vote would probably be Liberal Democrat if you're on the left or Liberal. You would put that in as your sort of second preference, but you would look for a Labour voter to cast your ideal vote for you somewhere where the opposite situation is in play. And
how do you go about pairing these people up, matching them?
It's very simple. You log into the site with Facebook or Twitter, and say what your preferences are, and the site will put you in touch with, or will suggest 5 people who have the complementary preferences, and it will show you what the polls are doing in those constituencies, so you can make an informed decision, as informed as possible, about whether that's going to be a useful vote, place to vote.
Of course, you have no control. This is open to abuse, is it not? Because you have no control over whether the person you team up with will in fact vote the way you've all agreed to vote.
That's certainly true that no one ever has control over what someone else does in the ballot box, because it's a secret ballot. But what we've done, by introducing the social profiles, is it allows you to actually see that there is a real person, hopefully, at the end of the deal, and you can get into conversation with them. And actually, in 2015, we paired up voters who were really, really pleased to work together and had very productive conversations. So I think, coming back to some of the points that you were discussing with John, I think what this really does is puts some more power in voters' hands. Obviously, progressive alliances or alliances on any side of the spectrum are quite difficult, as John said, for party leaderships to entertain. But this way, voters can actually make their own minds up about how much they're willing to collaborate and compromise in in the aim, their wider political aims, if you like, for the wider political culture
like to
see.
Let me get John's take on that. This is the digital age, John, which facilitates ideas like this. What do you make of it?
Yeah, no, well, I think actually it's a very nice idea, and it's very good to inform people about the sort of tactical situation in their constituencies so that they can vote intelligently. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, what Vote Swap is trying to do is implement the alternative vote system by alternative means under the sort of single first past the post system that we have at the moment. But the alternative vote system, which I supported at the time, was rejected by the British people in 2011. That would allow people to express their preference and to rank their candidates in order of preference, which would achieve the same thing as Swap My Vote, in a sense, that you'd be able to transfer your vote to your next preferred candidate. But the British people didn't like it, and I have to accept that they weren't persuaded. So we have to rely on initiatives like Tom's instead.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John. It's certainly true. Yeah, AV was a way of looking at this. I think some of the critiques of that referendum were that the alternative wasn't radical enough, and actually, if you had a proper proportional system, you'd see a much better engagement from the electorate, because I think at the current in the current situation that there are millions of votes. In fact, in the 2015 election, half of all votes went to losing candidates. So that's half of all votes that are not seeing representation. Now imagine a system where everyone's vote actually saw some positive representation in Parliament. It would be a very different democracy, I think, we'd live in.
Well, I think the leader of one of the leaders of the Green Party certainly agrees with you on that. John Rentoul, thank you very much indeed, and thanks to the last voice you heard there as well, Tom de Groenewald, co-founder of Swap My Vote. What Caroline Lucas said, this isn't about us wanting the Green Party not to win seats. She says we will be standing on a unique policy platform, opposing the Tories' Brexit and putting forward big ideas for a fair economy and the protection of our environment. But she says our call for a meeting between party leaders on the left isn't about the Greens standing aside. It's about giving people in this country the best possible chance of defeating the Conservatives and bringing in a truly democratic voting system. A little later on, we'll talk about Jeremy Corbyn's performance in a speech today. And the reality is that politically, in terms of the polls, the Conservatives and Theresa May riding high. We'll talk about that later on from 2. But in terms of your vote, think about your vote and how you intend to wield it. To use it, to wield it, however you... I regard it as wielding your vote, but however you intend to vote. Does an idea like this, where there is an arrangement made between parties or between individual voters to try to assure the outcome that you want, is that something you can work with, can go along with? 0345 6060 973 is the number you can call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. It's 16 minutes past 1 now. The two leaders, the co-leaders of the Green Party, have reached out to the leaders of the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats to say let's work together in certain constituencies to consolidate that vote of the left, such as it is. If you think you are, broadly speaking, a left or left of centre voter, is that something you can get on board with? Swapping your vote between parties if they make an arrangement in a particular constituency, a tactical manoeuvre really to beat the Conservatives in that particular constituency. Is that something you would welcome or not? 0345 6060 973 is the number. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. As somebody myself who's been a floating voter all my life, I think it works for me. If I was in a constituency where that was a factor, then it would. I think it's fine. I think it's a fine way to go about things. If you think you want a particular party to win in a particular constituency for whatever reasons that you have for that, but that voting for the party you've always voted for won't achieve that, then why not float a little? Why not float a little and achieve what you want? 0345 6060 973. I know that's anathema to some people who are lifelong members or supporters of particular political parties. 84850 is the number to text, and you can tweet at LBC. Let's read just a couple of those texts and tweets before we hear from Joanna in Sutton and Malcolm in Northolt. Is this not a form of vote rigging, Sheila, asks Paul. I don't think it is, do you? That could reduce Labour MPs. It's important psychologically to win. Working together in the House of Commons would achieve the same result, says Cindy. To stop this nonsense, we need to adopt a PR system, proportional representation, like most of the EU. Oh, don't mention the EU. Every vote should count towards the party of your choice. I have already lent my vote away from the party I would vote for, Green, to SNP, so I'm totally backing this, says Will in Glasgow. Are you? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Joanna, hello.
Oh, hello. I'm a first-time caller, so I'm a bit nervous.
Well, you're very welcome.
As a young person, I just feel like Conservative Party isn't for me, and I would rather lend my vote to either, well, not really Labour, because I don't think it's going very well for them at the moment, but maybe Lib Democrats, just to sway the vote, basically. I just think most people are focusing on the EU and the Brexit, but I'm really focusing on the policies and how it's going to help the younger generation going forward. That's my main concern for my changing my vote.
So am I right in saying that you are a centre-left voter? Is that how you would describe yourself?
I am, yeah.
So if the constituency of Sutton, I can't on the top of my head remember the political makeup of it, but if by voting for Labour instead of the Lib Dems, your instinct is to vote Lib Dem, but if instead of that you voted for Labour at their urging, that they arrange themselves in that particular constituency to make it a Labour vote that you would have to vote if you were to vote left wing, would you go along with that as a means of keeping the Tories out?
Yes, I voted Labour in the past two votes. It's just that obviously at the moment the media's not really on Jeremy Corbyn's side, and personally I don't really like him as a leader, but if it means that we do get a bit more people in the parliament that are presenting my views, then yes, of course I will vote for Labour.
And Jeremy Corbyn, is he the problem for you for Labour, or is it more than that?
I just don't think he's likeable, and a lot of people focus on that, really. It's not really about the policies as such. I just think they don't like him as a person, and unfortunately that does sway votes just based on that, really. So I don't think you, very well.
For you, the person matters as well as the policies?
The policies matter to me because, I'm 25 years old, so I like to think I've got quite a few things to achieve in my life. So being able to get a house, being able to do better in my job, being able to, live, because the cost of living is going up. If a policy in any of the parties representing that, then I will vote for that, basically, because I think at the moment I feel like the younger generation is quite struggling a little bit in terms of the future, being able to own their own houses, being able to get jobs. So if I can do something that will help us in the next 5 years, then I will vote for that party.
Well, just so you know, if you don't already, I didn't, but I've been given the information. It's held by a Conservative MP, Paul Scully, at the moment. Yeah, you probably knew that, I'm sure. Who had, at the last election, 41% of the vote. But not far behind, not super close, but not too far behind, was the Liberal Democrats with 33.7% of the vote. Yeah. Labour well behind with 11% of the vote. So it sounds like you're in a position where your political beliefs match a decent chance of your candidate winning if enough people agree with you.
Yes, and I honestly do. I was saying to my colleagues at my workplace, because I work for the NHS, so I really think that even people, in terms of regards to the NHS or for parents as well, if one of the parties actually do a policy that could help young people, I think it's great for them, because that's why I feel like the Liberal Democrats got a position a couple of years ago, because they said about the tuition fees. They've got quite a lot of votes through that. So I think if one of the I think
they lost quite a few votes through that as well, second time round, didn't they?
They did. But if one of the Conservatives or Labour or Lib Democrats did put something big out there, I reckon that would sway the vote for quite a lot of people.
Joanna, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. A very engaged young voter, Joanna, who's just 25. Malcolm has called from Northolt. Hello, Malcolm.
Yes, hi there. Yeah, I mean, following on from that lady, they're making a lot of sense there. Yeah, I would be interested. I'm thinking what to do. I've never been so confused at a run-up to what is going to be a very fast process in election. I am more concerned about, though, the Conservatives having such a huge landslide victory that we end up with no effective opposition that's challenging or questioning anything they do. And I don't think that's healthy for democracy. But what do I do to stop that? Yes, tactical voting I may have to consider. At the moment, I'm not familiar with Labour's policies or otherwise, and if there's alternatives, other parties merging together and fighting constituencies jointly, then I would really consider that, because I don't like the idea of a single party wielding so much power, unchallenged, unquestioned. I mean, the Conservatives at the moment, my view is that they know the cost of everything but the value of nothing, and that concerns me a little bit. And if they carry on down that road of just simply basing decisions on cost, then I'm concerned about the future and welfare of my children, elderly people, and what you've been talking about today, people with psychiatric problems and mental health problems, starving funding to that area. Thank God LBC and Global are stepping in to make up the difference. But I'm very worried about the fact that the Conservatives may just have a complete landslide, and I really don't think that's healthy for our democracy and for our future.
And who would you vote for instinctively before you started to think about tactical voting?
Well, for the first time, I'm thinking, well, what do I do? I mean, I haven't even seen policies yet. I'm going to wait, because I think, very much like the presidential election in America, there's always something that comes out that Theresa May is avoiding and hiding away at the moment a little bit from coming out with any policies and making any commitments at all, and wants to avoid it being challenged or questioned or having to put actually say what her policies are and have to stand by it in the future. That I think this is going to be very interesting. So I'm waiting to see what happens about debates. There'll be a lot of debates on LBC.
Do you think she should go on television as well? Do you think she should take part in the leadership debate?
Yes, because I want her to put in words what her policies are, because I want to hold her to account. That if, and the newspapers and LBC will, I know you will, that if she says one thing, I don't want her then, like she does, there won't be an election, now there is, opportunistic sort of...
Well, you say opportunistic, and other people have said it's a sign of strength to change your mind. It's such a funny one, that when a politician changes their mind. I don't think it is necessarily a sign of weakness to change your mind, but it's always a risky moment in politics when you say that you have, isn't it? Thank you very much, Malcolm, for your call. Malcolm calling from Northolt there. Get back to your calls on this in a few moments in your texts and tweets. If you are a left or left of centre voter, broadly speaking now, would you be happy as a means of keeping the Tories out of the seat that you live in, the constituency that you live in? Would you be happy to vote for a party that was specifically put there as the left-wing party, and others staying away from that seat? Or do you think that's playing with your vote? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. The time is 1:31. Meantime, let me read a couple of the texts and tweets that you've been sending in. Tweets first. I consider myself a left-wing voter, and I am 100% behind the idea of a progressive alliance. Unfortunately, I can't see it happening. A fair bit of support for it, actually, on text and tweets. Vote swap centre-left coalition is the only way to deny a massive Conservative majority. Jeremy Corbyn must recognise this and embrace the Lib Dems. Well, it was interesting on the programme the other day, just after the announcement by the Prime Minister of a general election, that Vince Cable, former business secretary in the coalition, said there would be no arrangement with them and the Labour Party, the Lib Dems and the Labour Party. And yet, interestingly, the following day, people like Nick Clegg and others were saying that they would work with and take support from, on Brexit, specifically on Brexit, people like Tony Blair and others. So we'll see how it all trickles down over the next week or so when people get into their positions for the election campaign. And just one more here on Twitter. Does the Green Party, Labour or the Lib Dems object to UKIP doing the same with the Conservatives? I don't know. Let's ask them when we speak to them. Thank you for those tweets. Keep them coming at LBC or 84850. Steve has called from Castle Donington. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Sheila.
Now, you have a Conservative MP?
Yeah, we have a Conservative MP who... I want the Conservatives to win. I want Theresa May to be our Prime Minister. I think she's a strong leader. I've got no faith in Corbyn or any of the others come to that. But I do have a dilemma when it comes to the voting, because although I want a Conservative government, I don't want my MP to retain his seat. He's done nothing for us in our wards. His voting record is atrocious. In North West Leicestershire, we've got one of the lowest unemployment records in the whole country. And I think at the last count, it was something like 1,700 in the whole of North West Leicestershire. Yet he's fought tooth and nail for this massive development in our county right on the doorstep, which has swallowed up swathes of prime agricultural land adjacent to the M1 that's going to create 7,000 jobs. Now, we told him, where are you going to fill these people from? Where are you going to fill these vacancies? And but he wasn't interested. Well, he's very self-centred. This is the MP who also sold his house under the hardship scheme for HS2 long before the route was even finalised, but he managed to sell it under the hardship scheme. And I've got no faith in him. He doesn't represent me. His policies don't represent what I stand for. But my dilemma is I do want a Conservative government, and I hate the fact he's put me in this situation.
Let me just. His policies don't represent. You mean he's got some policies locally that drive you crazy, but broadly speaking, you're a Conservative?
Yes, that's right.
And how big is his majority there?
He increased it at the last general election.
Substantial?
I think it's something like 5,500 now is majority, maybe 7,000 is majority. But other parts of the county love him, which we can't understand. But for our particular ward, he does nothing for us. He won't listen to us.
How might you vote if you don't vote Conservative?
If I don't vote Conservative, then possibly UKIP.
So you'd go further to the right rather than towards the centre?
I would. You would never in a million years get me moved towards the centre left. Never in a million years.
Why?
Why? I just don't think they have any credible answers. I don't think that Corbyn is an electable leader. I didn't think Blair was, with everything that's come out afterwards, sorry. Going all the way back, I've been voting all the way back since the time of Harold Wilson, and I didn't think even he was credible as a leader. To me, Theresa May is far more, she's stronger, she's more in control of the situation. One of the longest running Home Secretaries that we've had, although she does flip and flop a bit, changes her mind, but don't we all?
Sometimes. Thank you, Steve. Steve in Castle Donington. I think he's going to vote Conservative, no matter what he says. Maybe I'm wrong, but he's not satisfied with his local MP. It's a slightly different scenario, that, though, isn't it? Because he still wants a Conservative government and probably a Conservative MP, just not that Conservative MP. Yoni's call from Maidenhead. Hello there.
Hello, Sheila.
Are you in favour of this kind of tactical voting, and more than tactical voting, tactical standing by the parties?
I'm absolutely in favour of tactical voting, and I will do everything or anything that I consider to be sensible, whether it's vote swap. I'll be campaigning for any progressive alliance, viable alternative. I live in Theresa May's constituency, and I vehemently disagree, actually, with the previous caller who... It's astonishing. His Conservative MP sounds very typical of most of the Conservative MPs, actually, that I see. So I don't know why he doesn't consider perhaps changing his vote to move slightly more towards the centre. But we were let down completely by Theresa May. Our constituency led by her, voted to remain in the EU, as we all know, and then without any hesitation whatsoever, as soon as she got a sniff of the PM role, she abandoned us and completely let us down. So I will absolutely do anything possible to stop a potential Tory landslide. It's completely undemocratic, and I would like the normal, ordinary, so-called citizen of this country to be represented.
Have you ever voted Conservative in Maidenhead?
No.
No, don't be silly, Sheila. You said that like, don't be ridiculous.
No, I grew up in. I've always lived in constituencies with large Tory majorities.
And I'm just looking. I'm just looking here at the results from the last election. It's quite a majority, isn't it?
It was on the last election. A few elections ago, the Liberal candidate got within about 3,000 votes of the Tories. So obviously, when our Tory MP happens to be the Prime Minister, despite the way she's so-called flip-flopping and changing her mind every moment to suit herself, it's very likely that she'll maintain that large majority. So it's quite likely perhaps that I'll consider vote swapping. I will certainly be happy to campaign for other parties, liberal alliances, progressive alliances.
Well, so but put it this way, given the whopping great majority she has, and it's a good example to use, actually, Theresa May's own constituency, 35,453 votes in first place. Second place, Labour, 6,394, so huge majority. Then the Lib Dems on 5,000 plus, UKIP, we won't include those just for now, Green Party, because we're looking at left-wing parties, Green Party, Independent, Class War. If you added all those together, you'd still wouldn't be anywhere near that 35,000.
Yeah, her majority has increased absolutely exponentially. Yeah. So, I mean, what I see as a long-term business owner in this community, and very community spirited, what I see is the ordinary person not being represented. Also, every single species of animal is being let down as well. We've got puppy farms and third-party puppy dealing. It's atrocious, and they don't care about any of the issues to do with children or elderly or animals. They just don't care about any of it.
Oh dear, well, you haven't got much hope, have you, really? Because that looks like an unassailable Conservative majority in Maidenhead.
Well, it is what it is for this constituency, but I can swap my vote to make something count elsewhere.
Oh, you would do that? Is that the swap you're talking about, inter-constituency rather than within your own constituency?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think, it's interesting because John Rentoul, my guest at the beginning of the programme from The Independent, poo-pooed it and said that, in the past, other leaders like Tony Blair, for example, had said it's just not workable. Do you think there is more of an appetite amongst voters for this? Politicians don't push for it. They are today in the form of the Green Party. But do you think there is an appetite amongst voters for this kind of thing?
I think there's a huge appetite amongst voters for their vote to count. And that has always been the case. And whilst proportional representation would be the best way to have that happen, it's unlikely, I think, in my lifetime to happen. So we're now looking at other options to make our votes count, and to ensure that we maintain at least some level of democracy. Where you have landslide victories and huge overwhelming majorities in the House of Commons, then the other voices are never going to be heard. And that's clearly undemocratic. So whatever your politics are, I support this, whatever party you happen to support. I think it's important that all of us, as much as possible, have our voices heard.
I think it loosens things up a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Yoni, thank you very much. Really interesting to talk to you. Yoni, calling from Maidenhead, Theresa May's constituency. Would you be happy if you are a left or left of centre voter? Would you be happy to almost horse trade your vote either within a constituency or swap it with another voter outside your constituency in order to try anyway to stymie a Conservative victory? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. The time is now 1:46. I'm beginning to think there is an appetite, quite a big appetite amongst voters, just you and me, ordinary people, non-politicians, for this idea of, on either side, idea of a kind of progressive alliance or alliances arrangements between parties to give your vote some more value, whether you're left or right, and depending on the constituency you are in. I suspect that amongst voters, there is an appetite for this, that it's the party system and the very enclosed nature of our political parties that makes the politicians not drive it. And we've asked the simple question whether you feel like it would be good, it would add to the value of your vote or take away from the value of your vote. And the general consensus seems to be that it would add to the value of your vote. So that's interesting to me that the politicians do not favour it and certainly don't sort of champion it in any way. But a lot of you, ordinary voters, telling me today that you would like the opportunity for parties of the left or parties of the right, depending on the situation in your constituency, to actually come together under one banner so that your vote can count. David is called from Wrexham on this. How do you see it, David?
Hi, Sheila. I just feel that this is like it's like going back to the days of Pip the Younger and that, with the politics. Your last caller was talking about she mentioned about the Conservative landslide, and then she mentioned about it being undemocratic, and she was talking about it didn't represent that the election didn't represent the ordinary person. I'm an ordinary person. They followed the voting system. That was very democratic. What is undemocratic is when you've got there's millions and millions of UKIP supporters who voted and they feel that it's undemocratic because there's no representation for them. Now, I do vote strategically because I'm in a place where I'm not going to get who I want. So it's the lesser of two evils.
Who do you want?
So, well, I would definitely. I voted UKIP last time, but this time I would definitely vote Conservative. I'm not going to get Conservative, so I'm going to have to sort of play about with the vote, look at it, and see what is what is going to be advantageous for the Conservatives. But what I find really sort of worrying is I see no difference between. She was talking about switching her votes from place to place to make it strategic. Well, that's one thing. But when you've got things like the media and you've got politicians and parties saying that this is a good idea and everything, there's no difference between that and a Turkish leader going to a European country and trying to persuade all the people to vote in a way that will be advantageous to his country, or Russians hacking in and trying to persuade, trying to sway the vote.
Tell me why. I know what you're referring to, but tell me why you equate it with that. I think that's an overreach, to say the least.
I think this is very dangerous. I think that a party should turn around and lay out their policies. And they should. Your research said that it's the party's job to persuade people to vote for them. Now, I totally agree with that, but they shouldn't be persuading people.
It is, however, if in a constituency, let's just use the left of centre argument because it's dominated the hour. If there are 3 left or left of centre parties in a constituency, and their primary stated aim is to gain some left-wing power for the people of that constituency, to avoid right-wing policy in that constituency, I think it's perfectly personally, I think it's perfectly valid for them to say, look, individually, we can't win this, but together with one person representing, broadly speaking, the left of centre vote, we're going to allow that person to stand. Now, I don't think there's anything. I don't think you can compare that with President Erdogan.
I think you totally can, because I think if you turn around, if the parties place their case in that and they put everybody votes in that, then they turn around and say we're going to have a coalition, then that's fine. But if they turn around and start saying things like put your vote here because it'll keep such and such a party out, that sends a dangerous message. It actually sends the message that if you vote and you do a legitimate vote at the ballot box, then there's people that are manipulating to keep you out. And that's very dangerous, because you start to turn around and say, well, what's the point of the voting system if people are actually going to manipulate it like that? It's okay if people do it individually, if they do it off their own back. But when parties start doing it before,
I understand your logic, but I still don't think it's as sinister as you seem to do, because a party can stand wherever it likes or not. And it can stand wherever it likes or not for any reasons it wishes. And the people can vote on their reasons and their candidate, seems to me.
Yeah, of course, but the people should have their own choice, and a party shouldn't turn around and say, the Labour Party shouldn't say, well, the Liberal Democrats could get in here if we all voted for them, so we're going to send out a message to all our sort of voters, let's vote for the Liberals and then we can keep the Conservatives out. Because that isn't voting, that's manipulation by the parties and everything.
I absolutely take your point. I just don't agree with it. I think I understand exactly what you're saying, David, so you do regard it. Okay. No, but that's fine. We're allowed to disagree. You regard it as playing with your vote, don't you?
I think it's very dangerous, because I actually started to think well, if they all ganged up and they suddenly turned around and they said, right, we're gonna persuade all our people, say, to vote for, say, the such and such party, Party A, and this keeps Party B out that I want to vote for, then I start to think, well, what is the point of a democratic, legitimate vote that's been manipulated by Party A and the other parties? And you just start to think, well, hang on, there's no point, and we then get into sort of strange pit the younger sort of politics of borders being moved and rotten boroughs.
We're not far off that anyway, are we, really, when the borders being moved? David, thank you. David in Wrexham. Elaine has called from Henley. Hello, Elaine.
Hi. I couldn't disagree with David more, actually. I'm in Henley, which is a strongly Tory seat, a Conservative seat, and has been. I looked at the history this morning as far back as 1918. I think there were just a few years when it went unionist for some reason. But anyway, it's always been Conservative. We had Michael Heseltine in the past as our MP, and we had Boris Johnson. And we've got a strong Conservative at the moment whose vote went up in the 2015 election. I know that my vote will never, ever count here. I don't think the Tories will ever be unseated here. And so in the last election, I decided I wanted to vote Labour, but it was pointless. So I swapped my vote with somebody over in Bristol West. And I voted Green here, and she voted Labour there.
Oh, so you've been doing your own version of it already, Elaine. Thank you, Elaine and Henley. Time for just one quick call before 2 from Naomi in Dartford. Hi, Naomi.
Hi. Basically, I'm a first-time voter.
Great. How old are you?
I'm 20.
Right, okay.
So the large one, I didn't really have any, attention towards it. I didn't believe anything about it. But right now, with how the political movement is going at the moment and how the youth are really into it is much more, because there's so much dividing. And the thing, what I believe in this voting in different constituencies strategically, because we need to do everything within our power to get the Conservatives out. So if you believe that you should vote for Green in your constituency because that's the only part I would do, I personally need to do that, because we need to do everything to get them out, because what their vision and how they're doing things is completely wrong. So if we need to do a political revolution to get them out by voting differently and strategically, then I think it's right on, and we should do that.
Are you excited about the election, Naomi?
I'm more than excited. I'm thrilled. Literally, I'm on my Facebook feed every single day, watching different news on different speeches and everything. I'm more engrossed in this election than anything, and I think that's what's revolution in this election, particularly because even the youth, people my age that weren't bothered before, are now bothered. They now want something done.
You're officially bothered. Don't forget the LBC Facebook page. There'll be plenty there between now and polling day. Thank you very much to Naomi in Dartford, and for all of your texts and tweets on this as well. The news is coming up in just a moment, but just before we do go to the news, I want to talk about Jeremy Corbyn's chances after a speech he gave this morning, in which he really laid into the Tories. He was very passionate. He was very effective, but the country's still voting Tory. Can he, as he says, turn things around? This is not a foregone conclusion, this election, according to Jeremy Corbyn. Is he right? Good afternoon. Now, it looks as though, taking all things into account, that Theresa May is sitting pretty, but no sensible politician sits back and presumes that to be the case so early on in an election campaign. But as things stand, polls and the difficulties over the Labour leadership, as things stand, Theresa May looks like she can and probably will win a substantial even huge majority, a landslide victory in the election on June the 8th. However, Jeremy Corbyn today, in his first big speech really of the campaign, was very passionate, very fluent, and I've said since he's been Labour leader quite a few times that he's an uncomfortable watch. I find him an uncomfortable watch. To be fair, I find Theresa May sometimes an uncomfortable watch when she's speaking and being interviewed. But he was very passionate, very fluent. He took questions. Theresa May did not take questions from journalists. She arrived at her event in a helicopter. He rocked up in Church Hall and off he went. It was his first major general election speech, as I said, and amongst the things that he said he was not going to play by the normal rules. He was going to be as unspun and direct as he was during his 2 leadership election campaigns. But he said, and this is where the passion kicked in, and there was real fire in his belly, it seemed to me. He said that he believes the Conservative Party has deliberately gone about setting people against each other, and particularly the strong versus the weak. He talked about vulnerable people, disabled people, people who are immigrant workers in this country, and particularly if they're from the EU, their status here still now has that question mark over it since Brexit. And he believes, and he said it very fervently, that the Conservatives are deliberately setting us against those people, groups of people, the ones he named, disabled, immigrants and the like. If he's right, why isn't he winning more? If he's right, why are the Conservatives so far ahead in the polls? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Graham Ellis joins me, a lifelong Tory voter who quit the party and took down a website of his own after what he described as appalling disability cuts by the Conservatives. We'll hear from Graham in just a second, but let's have a listen to what Jeremy Corbyn said today, to a little of it anyway.
Don't be angry at the privateers profiting from our public services, they whisper. Be angry instead at the migrant worker just trying to make a better life. Don't be angry at government ministers running down our schools and hospitals, they tell us. Be angry instead at the disabled woman or the unemployed man. It's the rigged economy the Tories are protecting that Labour is committed to challenging.
That was a little of what he said earlier on. Graham Ellis, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Tell me why you took down your website over Tory disability cuts. What was the tipping point for you?
At the budget, the 2016 budget time, it was the announcement the week before about cuts in employment and support allowance, and then as part of the budget they were proposing making cuts in personal independence payments, which was just, too much. Disabled people are reliant on these payments, ESA, if they can't work, and if they can work or can't work, the personal independence payment helps buy a minimum of care that they need to get by in their day-to-day lives. So to cut that was just too far. I believe that I could not belong to a party that was destroying disabled lives. And they've gone on since that budget to prove that, that's still their policy.
Do you believe that Jeremy Corbyn is right when he says there is a deliberate policy to set the strong against the weak in this country?
I think, yes. When you look at the legislation and the budget that we've just had this year, the better off come out of it better, and disabled, single parents, even now they're targeting the pensioners, and it's an attack to lower their income, but there's no corresponding cuts on the other side.
What about, Theresa May said it only yesterday in Prime Minister's Questions that the number of people who've been taken out of tax altogether under the Conservatives.
Yeah, but to pay tax, you have to work. If you don't work, you're relying on welfare benefits, which are being taken off people when they're being found unfairly fit for work, and then having to go through a long process to have a tribunal to get their entitlement to benefits restored. The number of people that are winning at appeal is actually rising, so it demonstrates the number of bad decisions being made by DWP.
Theresa May famously gave a speech at the Conservative Party conference after an electoral defeat in which she said, we're seen as the nasty party and we need to do something about that. Do you think she is now leading a nasty party?
She's definitely leading a nasty party. And some of, like her Easter message, you know, and the speech outside of 10 Downing Street on Tuesday morning, saying that she was doing all this because the people were behind her, but Westminster wasn't. I mean, the woman's deluded.
Why is she so successful then, Graham? If it's blindingly obvious, as you say, as Jeremy Corbyn says, that this is a party that can be cruel. That's what you seem to be saying. It's what Jeremy Corbyn's certainly saying. Why is it so far ahead in the polls?
Because I think a lot of the drive has been Brexit, and that's given them a certain leap in the opinion polls. Though, even though the country's divided on Brexit, the opinion polls are giving them that slight lead. I think
it's not a slight lead; it's a substantial lead.
Well, yeah, are giving them the lead that they've got, but. You know, in the last few weeks, they're doing things that are going to crumble that lead because, you know, the Conservatives have always played to the pensioners, and that's why pensioners' benefits have been sacrosanct up until recently when they're talking about, for instance, now taking out the triple lock.
Do you think the young vote will be very important here if it can be mobilised?
I think so, yeah. And there are people... as a referendum was the last national vote that weren't 18 at the time and couldn't vote, that will be taking part in this general election, and I think that may help make a difference.
All right, Graham, thank you for talking to us. Graham Ellis, former member of the Tory party. He quit over what he says is cruelty, particularly towards people with disabilities. Jeremy Corbyn would agree with him and probably welcome him with open arms if he heard him speak. Another Graham has called from Manchester to say why, despite this, if it's true, despite this, they're flying ahead in the polls. Graham, hello.
Good evening, good afternoon.
Not quite yet, yeah.
Why when I'm waiting for you?
That's good.
It's the highlight of my week.
Oh, well, I'm pleased to hear that. You poor man. Things can only get better, as they say.
No, please. That takes me back to Blair. I don't want to think about that.
That's why I said it.
The thought of that dance, dear me.
God.
Peter Kay, your heart out.
Go on.
Yeah, and I have a couple of things to say if I'm to be allowed time.
You are.
And I've spoken to a number of people since Theresa May took charge of the country, and everybody who I speak to, they keep telling me Jeremy is unelectable, and I say why, and they say because everybody says he is. That's it. That's the bottom line. He's unelectable because everybody says he is. Because he's saying what people don't want to hear. He's telling us that we've got an unfair system that targets people at the bottom, like my son, who I've spoken to you about on many occasions.
Yes, yeah, he has learning difficulties, doesn't he?
Yeah. People just don't realise it's that thing that was it. I remember the pastor in the Second World War said, they came for the Jews and we did nothing. They came for the middle classes when it came to, and people who were self-employed when the government wanted to raise the national insurance level and blow me down. Of course, they went back on that one, but at the same time, they gave 76 billion back to the wealthiest in the country.
For the sheer excitement of the election campaign, it would be great if Jeremy Corbyn was right that this is far from a foregone conclusion. But everywhere you look, people are saying it is.
Yeah, but they're saying it is because they're led to believe that it is. The Daily Mail would have us believe all sorts of things. The same Daily Mail whose owner gets massive big subsidies from the EU. These are just they're so duplicitous. Let's go for the big companies. Let's go for Google. I mean, I said to you before, and I'm going to repeat it until they're nailing the lid down. Put everybody on PAYE. Let's have a fair taxation society. And why do we all aspire to be paying as little tax as possible? Why is she heralding the fact that she's taking so many people out of paying tax? That's why we've got less.
Well, but in a sense, I personally support that because we're talking about very low incomes here.
Yeah, but those people aren't better off because they're not paying tax. That's not the reason they're better off at all. In fact, they're not better off. They're just led to believe that they're better off because they're not paying tax.
Did you hear Jeremy Corbyn's speech earlier on?
I did indeed. Yes, I was stood on my chair cheering the guy.
Were you really? Literally?
Literally, yeah, and his leather as well. And I shouldn't be allowed that.
You shouldn't be doing that.
When I'm a pensioner, you shouldn't be allowed to have anything leather.
Slippy, risky strategy, Graham. Thank you for your call anyway. Well, I'm sure I'll talk to you again between now and polling day, Graham, in Manchester. If Jeremy Corbyn is right, if Graham is right, and the previous Graham Ellis is right, that the Tories are deliberately setting the strong against the weak in this country, deliberately weakening those who are already vulnerable. Why do they keep on winning? Why do we keep on voting for them? 0345 6060 973 is the number. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Coming up after 2:30, by the way, as part of our Mental Health Matters coverage, which we'll talk more about after 3. Our senior reporter Vincent McAviney has been to Maytree House. It's the only suicide sanctuary in the whole of the UK, and we will hear from him and from there in about 15 minutes' time. It's 16 minutes past 2. Joshua's called from Manor Park to talk about why the Conservatives seem to be sort of steaming ahead in terms of electoral popularity, electoral success, when plenty of people, including Jeremy Corbyn, front of the queue today, claiming that they are a cruel party. Joshua, hello.
Hi, good afternoon, Sheila. I was prompted to call because of that question that you raised. Why is it that so many people are voting Conservatives if generally people are unhappy? And I believe that the issue is the one of cognitive dissonance, the fact that you can have two conflicting ideas in head, and you have to obviously make a choice, and one chooses not to look at the unpleasant idea, rather looking at the positive idea. So, to give you an example, a lot of people realise, or the majority of people in this country are actually not surviving. As Theresa May said when she first took office, that they're just about managing. Okay? Now, those people that are just about managing, what they've got in their head is they've got in their head a vision of Britain being a better vision and one where life will improve for them. And they see that life will improve for them through the Conservatives. But that's a promise that the Conservatives are given. But the reality is, because Conservatives are all about business and business is all about capitalism, it is actually impossible for life to improve for the majority.
However, Joshua, just a quick point. Business and capitalism, or certainly business, aren't inherent wrongs.
No.
They create great employment. They create they allow people to thrive.
No, it doesn't. Capitalism doesn't do that.
No, business creates jobs, and jobs allow people to thrive.
Business creates jobs, but the jobs are not paying people enough to survive, Sheila. That's the problem. And the reason why business isn't paying enough is because it's not required to. Legally, a business is there to produce as much profits for itself and its shareholders. And the biggest resistance to that is obviously the payroll. If they can push down the pay, the more profits they make. Why is it that companies are not being taxed more by the Conservatives? Okay, why is it that the profit margin has to be so high? We hear of all of these big companies, the communication companies, the rail companies. They're all making billions of pounds a year profit, Sheila. How is it possible that they're able to make so much profit if the society needs more money for the NHS, needs more money for schools, it needs money for roads,
and can't find it?
Well, it can find it.
Claims it can't find it. Yeah. So
it chooses not to find it.
So what? We've got Stockholm syndrome.
It could be. It's Turkey's voting for Christmas at the moment, and it's been that way for the last 50 years, Sheila. Because if you look at productivity gains have gone up exponentially because of the advances of computers and the way that we've used computers and technology, all right, just-in-time management and so on. But where has all of that productivity gains gone? It's gone in bonuses and massive pay salaries for the executives of companies for the last 40, 50 years. Sheila, that's what's gone on, and that's why the richer have gotten exponentially richer, and the poor are struggling to put food on the table.
So despite very high levels of borrowing that the Tories themselves wouldn't want to be a party to, they're bringing the deficit down, the employment figures are looking fairly healthy, they're taking people out of taxation. These are the successes that they would point you to. You say what to that?
I would say that bringing the deficit down is good, but it doesn't have to be brought down at such a fast rate. And I would say just focusing on employment figures is not really the issue, because obviously if you're employing a massive amount of people and you're calling them employed, but they can't even support themselves and they have to rely on the government to sustain themselves through supplementary benefits,
then pay is wrong.
Absolutely, low pay is wrong, because what's happening is, Sheila, we, the poor, are actually subsidising the rich, the companies, the employers, by having to rely on, in-work benefits. Why is it that we're not paid enough? That in-work benefits shouldn't exist.
Joshua, thank you. Thank you for your call, Joshua in Manor Park. We like it that way. We believe it will get better, despite evidence to the contrary, says Joshua. Joan, what do you make of that? Joan in Maidstone.
Hello, I deal a lot with the homeless, which is leaping up by leaps and bounds. Disability, I've got in my own family. There's a lot of stuff going on. What basically happens is people have lost hope. They do not believe things can get any better, and this is where they're at. And also, you see, the homeless, in order to register to vote, they've got to jump through hoops. And this is the reality. An awful lot of homeless are around now, sleeping on the streets and this sort of thing. And so many people that they're saying, well, what's the point? They're all going to be like it anyway. So if you take the majority who are feeling really, at the very bottom of the pile, of course you're going to get the more able and this, that and the other voting for the status quo.
And that's what you believe is happening?
It is happening. Do you know at the moment what's happening is that people are going into work. They can't afford the mortgage, they can't afford the rent, so they're sleeping in their car, which is essential for their work. And we are talking sometimes about professional people. Also, what is happening, a lot of youngsters are finding adverts for sex in exchange for accommodation.
Yes, I was seeing that the other day, which was astounding, absolutely astounding.
And what is frightening me even more than all of this, she hasn't got a clue regarding foreign affairs, cuddling up to Trump. Now, I know Korea. I've been to Korea. I have friends in Korea. And you cannot insult the god of North Korea without getting some sort of flashback. That man is serious. And when Boris, bungling Boris stands up and says his party piece, waving the big stick, Obama and all the presidents before him knew exactly how to tackle these people.
Okay, Joan, thank you for your call. Joan in Maidstone. No one is angry at immigrants, says this text. I don't think that's true, but you might not be, but plenty of people are. No one is angry at immigrants, but I am angry at Labour, says this texter, whose profligate spending and open-door, mass, uncontrolled immigration policy, when in power, have taken us to the place we're in today. That is why the Conservatives are ahead, says this texter. I feel for the disabled, but you cannot run a country for a minority. Blame the liars who've been on benefits as a lifestyle for the changes. He doesn't do a thing for my family. I presume he means Corbyn there. He doesn't do a thing for my family. Dan has called from Epsom. Hello, Dan. Why do the Conservatives keep winning?
Well, that's your texter was absolutely right. He's got the liberty. I disagree with you wholeheartedly. I do not think that people blame immigrants directly. But the number, it's got nothing to do with Brexit. The number one issue.
Do you listen to my programme? Do you listen to LBC often?
I do, but
and you don't think people are blaming immigrants for a lot of things?
I think maybe people with low IQs do, but I think most people understand that it's successive governments that have let us down. You can't really blame the individual because that is racism, but it's successive governments that have allowed mass uncontrolled immigration, and you can see it before your very eyes. I'm originally from London. You can see it happening. I mean, it was the Labour Party. How dare he have the guts to get up and say it? The brass neck of the man. It was his party, Wallace, Blair and Brown, that allowed over 5 million people from outside the EU to come here, whilst at the same time having no caps on new EU member states. And what did you think was going to happen? Well, how did you think people were going to feel? What did you? This is why we're.
So hang on. So, how do they feel? Angry?
Well, Yeah, they feel like they had something. It's the biggest story in this country that nobody's talking about. In the 13-year government, we had a government that socially engineered our country and purposefully.
Dan, you can't say nobody's talking about it. Are you sure you listen to LBC?
I do listen to LBC.
We're talking about it all the time.
Yeah, but it should be the number one issue. And he's getting up saying things like, "Well, I don't understand it. Don't blame immigrants." No one is. I'll tell you what, hardly anyone I know wants to blame an individual, but we do want recompense. Like the housing crisis, on the left, they'll make you believe, we all know that governments haven't built enough housing, but the fact that we've let countless millions in at the same time has just made the situation worse.
Let me ask you this then, Dan, with the barista visas in mind. What if we need the numbers we have? What then? Who's right, who's wrong then?
Well, you're also talking people coming on saying, well, you know, one of the reasons people are so low paid. Why do you think that is? Because for 20 or 30 years, we've just had, you know, the world's
You slightly dodged my question there, Dan. What if we need the numbers of foreign workers that we have at the moment? What if we need them? Who's right and who's wrong then?
Yeah, but what you're doing is no one with a brain is saying that we don't need any workers. We might do.
No, I didn't say that. I'm talking about the number that we have. You're talking about the number that we have. It's too many. It's a disgrace. It's all Labour's fault. What if it turns out that economically we need those numbers?
I don't think that's the case. I mean, obviously, less people means that wages go up. I mean, that's just an economic truth. You know, that if there's less people, if there's an influx of massive people in the marketplace for mainly unskilled and trade jobs, why do you think they're particularly unskilled? Why do you think they're paid so badly? Because there's always someone else there to pick up the mantle. That's why.
All right, Dan, thank you for your call, Dan in Epsom. That's his proposition as to why the Conservatives keep winning. What do you say? 0345 606 0973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. We'll also hear from our senior reporter, Vincent McAviney, as part of our Mental Health Matters coverage today. He's been to Maytree House. It's the only suicide sanctuary in the whole of the UK. That's all coming up in the next few minutes here on LBC. Let's get the headlines now at 2:31. Isaac has called from Croydon and Tim from Southend to carry on our conversation about why the Conservatives seem to be romping home at the moment, despite an awful lot of you calling to tell me you think they're a cruel party. They're still the nasty party, to coin Theresa May's terminology from years ago. And Jeremy Corbyn gave a speech this morning where he said they are deliberately setting the strong against the weak. So why are we voting for them in so many numbers? Isaac, hello.
Hello, Sheila. Good afternoon.
Why do you think the Conservatives are still winning?
I think it's the narrative that Labour is the one that opened the doors for immigrants to come in without any sort of proper checks and ensuring that immigrants go back to wherever they come from. The Conservatives have successfully done this and are winning on that basis. But I want to say this. I'm an immigrant. I came to the UK in 1999. And I saw opportunities that the UK has to offer. I took advantage of it. I schooled here. I'm a qualified network security engineer, and I paid back into the economy. Now, this is for the so-called 5 million immigrants that, you know, I heard one of your callers say that the Tony Blair and other leaders allowed 5 million immigrants unchecked to come in. Now, many of these immigrants are just like me. They come in, they see advantages in the system, they take advantage, they educate, they pay back. Where so-called indigents don't take advantage, immigrants come here and take advantage, work and pay their way into the system. Now, I want you to imagine, Sheila, a day when every so-called 5 million immigrants goes on the picket line and goes on a strike. Imagine what will happen to the UK economy. I see so many so-called indigents that choose the easy path, claiming benefits. We don't do that. So it irks me when I hear people blame the immigrants.
So when the caller, I know the caller you're referring to, when he said he's not angry at immigrants, and you know, we believe him when he says that, but a lot of people, I believe a lot of people are angry at immigrants because they're directing their displeasure in a strange direction. Do you believe that that's the case, that there is anger being deliberately directed towards immigrants?
Oh, that is absolutely the case. I listen to LBC all the time, and I hear worse things. Sometimes I cringe, over the things I hear. The immigrant is not to blame. In fact, the immigrant has been a blessing to the UK economy.
I agree with you, Isaac. Thank you. Well, not in every instance, but certainly in most instances, that's for sure. Thank you, Isaac and Croydon. Tim in Southend. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Sheila. This is a bit scary. First ever phone-in experience and just come out the dentist.
Oh, dear. You're a sucker for punishment, but you're very welcome. So, is your face still numb, or was it just a checkup?
No, it's just a replacement tooth, so it's fine. It's fine.
Good.
I was just picking up on some of your earlier comments that I had before the dentist about the Progressive Alliance.
Yes.
Let's just enter politics and so on, and it took me back to the day after Cameron's victory in the 2015 general election, and I kind of expected Labour to win, like I think a lot of people did, because they'd swung back on the NHS as their crutch for getting elected, which has happened time immemorial. I've been following politics for a long time now, and that's always been a bit of a guarantor. And I thought, well, if that doesn't work for Labour now, I think, and that suggests that people realise that the NHS is an unfathomable problem for any government, I think. Then I think I just wondered where Labour in particular and left-wing politics was going, because I think it had already lost the argument on the economy a long time ago.
So do you believe if the left, not just Labour, but if the left can't counter the Conservatives in the current climate, it never will? Is that what you're saying?
I think, the current climate is what it is. I think most people who look at this will try to look at it in a balanced way, and I think it's quite difficult. I come from my background and people come from opposite backgrounds, so it's quite difficult. But I know my instincts, and therefore I try to look at the other side of the argument. I think the difficulty is when you get into government, it's extremely difficult to square the circle, and everything has to be funded. So when I tune into Question Time and people from the audience are saying we must have money for social care, we must have money for mental health, we must have money for the army, we must have money for this particular issue, I'm kind of thinking, well, okay, where are you going to take it away from? And no one asked that question, and no one got an answer for it. So it's always...
Or get more of it from taxation.
Well, yeah, and of course, my view of where Labour have gone in particular is not left to centre. I think now they've swung markedly back to the more communist policies of the 1960s that I remember very well, when the trade unions were a heavily communist-influenced organisation.
Well, it's a socialist party under Jeremy Corbyn, isn't it? It's and unashamedly so. It's a socialist party under Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell and others. Thank you, Tim, for your call. Tim in Southend. Hope the teeth stay well. You're listening to Shelagh Fogarty on LBC. We'll get more from Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, in just a few moments on that announcement from Labour this hour that a second referendum on the EU is not our policy and it won't be in our manifesto, they say. Talk more about that in a second with Theo. Keep your calls coming, though, on why the Conservatives continue to be successful, if, as many claim, they are the nasty party. 03456060973. It's 2:48. I'll get back to your calls in just a moment, but Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, is here. We were just saying, not quite a U-turn, more of a reversing round a corner.
Yes, reversing sharply round a corner, maybe with the back end flipping out into the middle of the road.
What are we talking about?
Not very graceful. Labour have ruled out holding a second referendum on Britain's leaving the European Union.
Right.
There had been speculation that the party could include it within their manifesto, which is still to be published, of course. John McDonnell, we caught up with him this morning, and he was still dodging the question.
You know our position. We're holding the government to account, full stop, and you know our terms of that. Keir set that clearly.
But are you ruling out a second referendum?
Well, you know our position at the moment, which is holding the government to account.
Now, a spokesman for Jeremy Corbyn has just released a very short statement. A second referendum is not our policy and it won't be in our manifesto. And this, of course, harks back to the referendum campaign. Jeremy Corbyn criticised by his own party for soft pedalling. Of course, Mr Corbyn himself has long taken a position of not particularly liking the European Union. Some say that he may even have voted to leave because of issues around state.
He says not, though, doesn't he?
He says not, yes, he says not.
So let's take him at his word.
But the sort of fearful from more pro-European Labour MPs was that he was soft-pedalling during the campaign because of issues around state aid and what we saw with steel industry and governments not being able to intervene on behalf of companies in their country. That's why he has sometimes been seen as not necessarily speaking up for Europe. But
interestingly, about half an hour ago, I would say, I retweeted something from George Eaton, the political journalist, and it was this. He said, if Lib Dems surge, likely, a stronger chance that Labour will back a second referendum option on the table.
It's a very shrewd analysis, and of course the Lib Dems under Tim Farron are coming up on the rails. They're trying to galvanise that 48% of the country that voted to remain within the European Union. We saw the result that they had in the December by-election result down in Richmond Park, where they put forward Sarah Olney against Zach Goldsmith, a principled Eurosceptic, and they won on that basis. And therefore, the Lib Dems won't necessarily. The fear is the Lib Dems won't necessarily be taking a chunk out of the Tory vote, but they could also take a chunk out of Labour's vote without the second referendum.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Theo Ashwood, LBC's political editor. Just before we get to the news at 3, there's time for a couple of more calls on why the Conservatives continue to do so well, if, as Jeremy Corbyn and many of you this hour are claiming, they are still the nasty party. Lucy, is it Wallingham?
Yes, it is. Hello.
Hello there. Hi, Lucy. How do you read this situation?
Well, this is layman's terms, basically, from my point of view. If you're doing okay under the Tories, you're going to vote Tory. And I think, to be honest, the majority of people are doing okay. And unfortunately, because of media, influence, a lot of the disabled and people unemployed, immigrants, etc., are frowned upon and looked down upon a little bit. And why would anyone who's doing okay want to help them, really? So I agree with a lot of what Jeremy Corbyn says, and I'm also quite pleased that he's not going to go for a second referendum, because I'm a left winger, but I voted Brexit, so I think I'm a bit of an enigma there.
You're the lesser spotted left wing Brexiteer.
Yes, I am.
No, I'm kidding. There are more of you than people let on, I think, Lucy.
Well, I think you're right, yes, but I've been accused of being right-wing, and I find that such an insult because I'm so not. I believe in fairness and common sense, and I do think sometimes when you read the press and the way they've sort of put people down who are trying to claim benefits, and you see one headline where somebody has cheated the system and it's huge, and you think, yes, but there are thousands of other people who are genuine, and it's a shame that they haven't more of a voice. So I think that's the trouble at the moment. It's all very I'm all right, Jack. It's a little bit, although it's not Thatcher's Britain so much. I started working at the time of Margaret Thatcher, and I did very well under her. I was paid too high a salary. I was getting bonuses and all sorts of things, and of course then the bottom dropped out in the 90s, and now I'm completely sort of on my uppers, if you like. But I've never been a Tory voter. I've never really agreed with their policies on a lot of issues.
Do you think they lack compassion?
I think they're very selfish. Yeah, I think they like to think they've got compassion, and it's almost a little bit patronising. It's like, oh, the poor people down there, oh bless, And sorry, I don't want to insult Tory voters. It's more the politicians that I'm talking about here. But I do think, speaking to other people, if they're fine, they own their own home and they're working, and they're going on holidays and things like that, they're quite happy. Why would they want to vote in a Labour government who could raise taxes and perhaps take away some of their lifestyle? They want to continue with what they've got. So,
okay, thank you, Lucy, for your thoughts. Lucy in Wallingham. Josh is called from Bristol. Hello, Josh.
Hi, Sheila. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah. How do you see it? Why are the Tories so successful?
I always feel that people remember the parties of the past, and they judge them far too much on them. So everyone's judging Jeremy Corbyn on the fact that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown practically bankrupt the country, and it's a fear for people for us to go back to that after the 6-7 years of Tory, what people claim to be austerity.
What do you say it is?
Your bills. I believe in paying your bills, and I'm not somebody that's rich either. I've come from a poor background, grew up on a councillor's house, estate and such.
But I don't think it's. I think it's a false comparison, isn't it? A nation's finances and an individual's.
Yeah, of course it is. But you can't just keep spending and spending, as Gordon Brown proved. But I do think that the reason the Tories will win is because people remember that time and they're more focused on the economy in that way. And also, as a second quick point, Newsnight's poll the other day showed that Brexit is the most 51% talked about thing in the public eye, followed by the NHS, immigration, education, and the economy.
Okay, Josh, thank you. I'm going to leave it there if I may. Thank you for your call, Josh, in Bristol.